Hi everyone. Hi Rachel. Happy to see you for the first time. So good. We have some people joining us. That's nice to see. Just a side note, this session is going to be recorded. I hope everybody feels fine with it. And yeah, let's begin.
And Maria, I can't record. It says I need permissions.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. I can see the sign recording, so I hope it works. Let's see. So, thank you once again, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you're doing great. And today's topic is the effectively presenting data to management, presented by Rachel and Yuri and me. So, I'm sorry, some technical question, no problem. I'll show it here shortly. So, Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. So I am Rachel Andrury. I am an aquatics division manager for a municipality in the U.S. It's the city of Covington, and I basically direct the Covington Aquatics Center. And that includes, the financial impacts of it, the operational stuff. And so I kind of get to do a lot of different work in that role. And one of my big responsibilities is reporting and basically garnering support with key stakeholders, community members, boards, and kind of reporting on the financial situation and doing a lot of data analytics presentations in a very trimmed down fashion, specific to audiences who aren't necessarily receiving and consuming that type of data on a regular basis. So that's why I decided I wanted to help out and do this with Maria. And then I also am a Trekkie. I play Zerg on StarCraft 2, if anybody wants to go. And I'm a general sci-fi nerd, so that's the background. But, don't tell, but I am Wonder Woman, so
Great. Thank you very much. So my name is Maria. I work as a cybersecurity advisor in EY. Greetings from Munich. And in the past, I have worked as a data analyst, and I still work as a data analyst kind of within my cyber department, because working a lot with databases, Tableau, Power BI, and so on and so forth. And of course, the consultancy always requires some reporting to management. That's why we decided with Rachel to work together on this topic and to present today. So last but not least, I'm the spacer, and I'm very happy to see here a lot of students from our study group. Yeah, and of course, thank you all for joining today. Our agenda is very simple. We go through some effective visuals, how to present data, key do's and don'ts, the purpose of presenting, and we'll have some interactive Slack activity at the end of the session. So the first half of the presentation will be presented by me, and the second by Rachel. We'll have to switch for a moment for presenter modes, our presenter modes, so don't be distracted by that too much. All right, so numbers have an important story to tell. They rely on you to give them a voice. A very nice quote by Stephen Few, which we like a lot. And this means that basically numbers have always something to tell, and you're the one who has to find the way to make them understandable and to make them impactful. So I would like to start with this graph. This is the chart that has been created by Minard for Napoleon, and this basically shows how Napoleon campaign went over against Russia. And the question is this informative? Yes, of course, it's informative, but is it understandable? No, not really. So it's quite a complex data graphic because it contains 6 different sets of data, all combined together. And if my boss would have looked at this, he would have said, and what do you want from me? What do you want to tell me? So basically, what could it look like? The key message is how many people were lost in the campaign of France, from France's side and from Russia's side. And as you can see, this is the graphic which shows the same key point, but it's much easier than the previous one, right? So there are generally different types of visuals, and we'll just go through very shortly to talk about which ones to use when. So the first one is the line graph. Everybody knows it. And if your boss wants to know, for example, the bear population, yeah, in Emerald Forest, how did it change from 2000 to 2006? This is then a very good option to select, because this graphic usually used to show some trends, to make predictions, and to compare in time how has some topic developed with time. The second one, very similar one, is the area chart. And it also is there to show trends. It's not there to show some predictions usually, but just for some simple comparison. You can have like different products here compared to each other, but what I have usually used it for, it's when you have maybe one topic which combines different things, different statuses in it, and you want to see how it went through different quarters, for example. So, for example, you have some ticketing system, you have 1,000 tickets in the first quarter, 2,000 tickets in the second one, and then some part of them is on hold, some of them is resolved. And this could be a good graph for those cases where you want to see how does it look like with the time, and maybe this is like the same topic, but like the same thing, but different statuses which are combined to each other. The next one is, of course, the bar chart. And this is good to compare among different categories that you have. Everybody surely used it a lot of times. And in my experience, bar charts, because quite often people think, should I go for bar or should I go for pie? Usually management likes bar because it doesn't change the values. So if you want to know how much money was spent, you want to see the money, not percentage, right? That's why bar chart is an option that is more commonly used than the pie, which is very similar, let's say, to this one. Stacked bar is even better. If, for example, if you compare the very related things throughout some period of time, for example, then it's the good choice to select. The next one is the pie chart, which I have already mentioned. So the problem with it that it shows the percentage, and this might distract and disrupt the whole image of what you want to communicate. So for some cases, it might be good, and this is some graphic that's a little bit out of the space, let's say the non-ordinary pie, but yeah, it can work out well. And as an alternative, there is the donut chart. And the good thing about donut is that you can, for example, put the most important number in the middle so that it attracts the attention to this number. One important thing is that if it's the donut or if it's a pie, the human's attention captures the part which is the largest slice of the circle. So it's mostly good if you want to pay attention to one slice, because the people will remember only the largest part. I will show you later on one example, because I use it quite often. So the last but not least, of course, there are many more graphs, but the waterfall chart is very good when you want to show the finances. This is the favorite one of management. They like to see, okay, we had so much at the beginning, we have won this much money, then we have spent this and that, and then how much do we have at the end of the day. So this is a good option. The radar chart, I use it in advisory quite often because this is good when you have different parameters. And for example, because I do cybersecurity, let's say, you do some assessments, you see a lot of different parameters, and you can imagine how it should have been, the state, and how it is planned versus what it is in reality. And these are a lot of parameters. So for example, this could be physical security, this could be asset management, and so on and so forth, different parameters, and the company might have different results on each of them. That's why this one is also good to use. It's also sometimes called a spider diagram. And now an example of an executive level slide. So this one, not boasting, but like I had to create one. And from all 20 slides that we had, everybody remembers this one, and everybody, all executives say, okay, this is very good, this is very good. So after you had 20 different slides, you will remember this number 79. So what does this slide says? It says that 79% of companies had a cloud data breach in the last 18 months. And as I said previously, the donut, this is a good thing because you pay attention to the yellow part of the donut. You will remember graphically how much it was. And then, okay, this is the major point. And then the second one is 43%. What is that? 43% of these companies experienced more than 10 data breaches in the last 18 months. So this is a quite powerful statement, right? And then you can like list on the right side top 3 cloud security threats which have caused these 10 data breaches, or 79% of companies have been breached lately in the last 18 months. So what I mean to say that if you prepare some executive level slide, you need to have some power statement, and you can mention some causes, but this is like the second part. You can mention 3 top things, like what is the reason for those. So, of course, if you have a lot of time, then this is the standard storytelling, where people usually begin what they did, how they did, then it gets to the climax where you say what was the finding, and at the end of the day, the resolution. But the problem is management doesn't have time, because they usually have 5 meetings before you and 5 meetings after you. So if you don't have time, you need to get to the point at once. So the first thing first, if it's written or it's not written, if you're presenting it live on PowerPoint, you have to have one management summary, which is only 1 page. Nobody's going to check the second one. If they have time, then maybe they will look through the whole document, but the management summary has to be 1 page, which delivers the main point, what you want to inform the management about. So get to the point, as my boss always says, if you take too much time. Next one is be convincing, and do not temper results. Of course, sometimes it may be not possible, but generally speaking, there are so many situations where people do some weekly reporting, for example, and all year long, all parameters are green, green, green. And then when it's close to the end of the project, you suddenly have all parameters, all indicators red, showing that, oh, we have a problem. We don't finish on time. So please don't do it like that. If there is something wrong, something is happening, you have to show it visually. So don't temper the data. And last but not least, do not criticize. So this is the very difficult point, generally speaking, for all IT people, because IT people usually are very direct. So we see that something is wrong, we just write, this is wrong, that is wrong, this is bad. Before you send it to your management, read it once again look at it and think, how does it come across? Because you might be absolutely right, but if it comes across as critics, then you might get in trouble, and people just don't like being criticized, and they don't take it serious what you're going to say. So maybe in some cases you need, if you want to formulate something, instead of direct sentences saying that this is wrong or this is wrong, maybe you can try to formulate it as a question, like, did I get it right that this is this and that? Does it work like this or that? So pay attention to this, because this is very serious thing, which IT people usually have troubles with. And now I'm done with my part. So I'm shortly stopping sharing my screen, and I make a host, Rachel. So remember to unmute yourself.
Unmuted. Okay, let's make sure I can.
We can hear you well, and we can see your slides.
Thank you. Thank you for verifying. I'm just going to make sure. Can you hear me? All right. So thank you so much. So we had some amazing points just made. So I'm going to kind of tag on to a lot of those, which starting with use the right visual. So that's basically, we got a bunch of examples. Thank you so much for those beautiful ones. One that I have found a lot of managers do like to use in their own presentations and like to see are pie charts. Give me pie charts, and not just blank, boring looking pie charts, but really interesting 3D ones where it's tilted and you can see all it and it looks so fun and cool. And the problem is a lot of these visuals that are more interesting distort the data. Or we'll have visuals where people like to, compare brands, and they'll put a picture of the brand logo within the chart in order to really just make it flashy, make it awesome. And that again distorts the data. You can't analyze the data very well with that type of visual. And one of the biggest problems with pie charts and pie graphs is that humans aren't good at detecting angles. They don't understand the difference between this angle and this angle when they're similar. Pie charts are amazing for one very specific purpose, representing a part of a whole. And usually only when it's large portions that aren't similarly sized or are, and that's the specific point, of the same whole. So if you have where you have 20 different data points, a pie chart is a no-go. You can't really capture what you're trying to do, and humans, the way we perceive a pie chart, it just does not work. So generally, is there an option besides a pie chart? And if not, does a pie chart really accurately represent the data, or is a visual going to work here? Because that's a major problem that we see when people are presenting. So use the right visual, use the parameters that Maria gave us on that. Some great, fantastic points on when to use what. There's a lot more data available out there on that as well, and some interesting articles. One of the recommended readings that I posted to our webinar in the schedule is an argument against pie charts. No, they are okay to use. There are good times, but no when. And then know that when you have these visuals where you're trying to make them fancy, sometimes that distorts the data. So keep everything really simple. Lots of white space is good. Make it easy to see, easy to understand. Let the data tell the story. It's good to be interesting visually, but when you're trying to visualize data, make sure that it's the data itself that's interesting, not just the visual. And then make sure that you highlight what the points are. Sometimes if you're looking at a visual, it's very like, oh, okay, this is what I get out of it. Did they get what you wanted them to get out of the data? If you post a chart, post a graph, what's the point of posting that chart and graph? How do you say, hey, this is what this is saying? And the executive slide that Maria posted was just beautiful on that, of pointing out, this is the thing you need to know from this. This is what this means. Let's highlight those things. And then always be prepared with your supporting data. So you have all those great, this beautiful slide put together or a beautiful page on a report. Okay, I have a question, and it doesn't involve anything that's on that slide. You want to be able to answer a manager or an executive or a board with, here's all the information I have. And, you know, if they then are questioning, you always have that data dump. You can just be like, here you go, here's all the information. They're going to say, okay, what's the summary? Give me the answer. And then make sure that if you're presenting verbally, that you don't talk too fast. When you're nervous, you might notice me every once in a while speeding up a little bit. When you're nervous, you tend to talk faster. You tend to forget to pause. You tend to enunciate poorly and just kind of meld things together because you're just trying to get through the presentation. So make sure that you set stuff for yourself where you have a stop point, where you have pause breaks, where you're able to say, okay, I need to speak at a more realistic rate here. And then enunciate, speak loudly enough that you can be heard. These are all really important things if you're presenting verbally. And then ensure data integrity. That point cannot be emphasized enough. When you're dealing with presentations at executive levels, at managerial levels, and especially if it's an external presentation and your manager's reviewing it, you can get a lot of pressure to make things look a little bit better than maybe they should. And remember that your job as someone who's presenting data is to tell the story the data tells, to tell the facts. I think it's important to remember that when we say, you know, data tells a story, the data has a story, it does. Data is facts, and a story is just an accounting of facts. If I tell you a story of she got up from her bed and she walked to the room, I'm stating facts that happened. Same thing when you're giving data. So just make sure that your story is true and that your story is taking a perspective that is actually having an accurate view of what's happening. The angle isn't lying for you. And then always remember when you're presenting to have some fun. If you do a boring presentation, you'll be bored, the audience will be bored, and the story won't be received. So make the story more interesting by putting some things like that in there, not in the data graphics themselves. So that's the do's. Conversely, we have the don'ts. A lot of these are just the opposite. But one important one is make sure, when I say keep your visuals simple and make sure they're well presented, you don't want to have crowded and busy slides that are painful to look at, in my opinion. It actually hurts my eyes, and you got to be careful not to get too fun with your have fun and just kind of make things animated and crazy to a degree that, again, a bit painful for the audience. So make sure that you have slides that are well done, present your information clean, don't try and have this be an art gallery. And then make sure that your slides also are a prompt for you. They're an outline. They have all your points and the key things. That important do of summarize the highlighted information. Make sure you have it here. This is what you need to know. Anything, if you're giving a slideshow presentation that's on the slide, should be the things you'd want somebody to write down if they're taking notes. It should not be a script that you're reading from. That will just make it painful to be in the presentation, and why didn't you just give it to me as a quick note on a piece of paper. And if you're doing a report, this same thing happens where you don't want to have just a bunch of block text as though you were just talking at them, and then the important points are just blended in, maybe bolded or something. Call them out, format it so that it's like, here's the points you need to know. Here's what I would say if I were talking to you. Again, don't talk too fast. It's good to put reminders for yourself. This presentation's great for me because I'm like, oh yeah, am I talking too fast again? So just make sure that you have those beats for yourself. And then the key thing that I'm so thankful on how Maria emphasized this, do not compromise the data. The data integrity is your responsibility as a presenter. And frankly, somebody might take what you present, package it up differently and twist it and put it out there. But you want to make sure anytime you're involved with it, anytime you've touched it and it's being presented and you have any control, that you're making sure that that's done in a way that the data is speaking and not the data is being used to tell a lie. And again, don't be boring. Unless you really, really have to. There's some presentations where you can't, have poppy Wonder Woman stuff all over the place, and they're, it's unprofessional or inappropriate or something like that. But there's ways to make those things fun still too, and make sure that you enjoy what you're saying. You might not enjoy presenting per se, but you enjoy what you're talking about. You know it, and you're getting to give the information in a positive way. Being interested in what you're talking about comes through, and it makes it more interesting to listen to as an audience. Oh, that was my don't. The key is compromise. That's what managers will say. It's like, oh, well, can compromise here, and key to compromise. Compromise is used as a good word. I have a very strong point of never compromise the data. That is not where we're talking about. Compromise is bad in this context. All right, so want to make sure that when you're deciding to do sometimes you're not deciding, you're directed to, but you're doing a presentation, that you start preparing by asking yourself why. Why are you presenting? What's the purpose? To tell a story of the data. Okay, well, what story? What is needed here? Why are we telling the story of the data? There is a lot of data out there. Why am I talking about this data? What is that data story? And then who is your audience? So that's going to be, if you're talking to management, if you're talking to an internal audience, these things are going to be really important for knowing how you want to visualize the data, what you're presenting, what your key points are, what story the data needs to tell. Because if you're talking to decision makers, that story might be a lot different than if you're just talking to someone who's looking at, hey, how accurate is our analysis, and do we need to change our models? So making sure that you're looking at that and deciding how to present the data based on who your audience is, what the story of the data is that it needs to share, and then also why are you giving this presentation in the first place. And that dictates whether you're trying to just inform, like, hey, this is what's happening, or persuade. And persuade might sound like I'm saying twist the data, and I'm not. I want to be super clear. That's that. Don't compromise. I might highlight on an executive slide the percentage of companies that are being compromised and what the issues are, in order to persuade management that they need to invest more in that, or persuade a company that they need to buy my company's services or whatnot. That's a persuasive argument, and you want to, in your visuals, instill that by having those be your highlighted key points, not by changing what the data says. If your intention is to inform, you might have a little bit more granular information in some of those visuals and highlight okay, here's what we're seeing as problems, and let's point those out and say, okay, how can we tackle these exact issues? So just considering all those things when you get into the what are you presenting, make sure that that is being selected based on these 3 questions. All right, participation time. It's my favorite. So I promised an interactive Slack activity because I want you guys to get participation for Study Jam, both in coming to the webinar and in participating. Plus, this is really fun in my opinion. So what's wrong with this? This is a very famous example of a misuse of a pie chart. And there aren't too many data points per se, but you may notice that this pie chart is slanted in such a way that if you haven't picked up on it yet, take a look at the green portion and the purple portion in particular. You'll notice there's a problem. There are many examples of horrendous charts and graphs, line graphs where the data points don't actually line up, etc., that you can find with just a quick search on the internet. So I challenge you to post a misleading graph or chart into the Slack channel. I have permission from the student leaders for general discussion, and hashtag misleading in your post so we can find and acknowledge your efforts. And this is gonna amp you up on participation for this program and also give some fun. Comment on each other's, share them. It's a lot of fun to see like how bad you can find. Or if you want to get really creative, you can create one and try and see, maybe make it a little more subtle and see if you can get people to find your misleading data representation. And the point of this is not to teach you how to mislead people, but rather to teach you how to make sure that you're not, and make sure others aren't as well. You look at it, you know how to find those errors. So this is our fun activity. Again, general discussion channel and hashtag misleading for your post. And we'd love to see those. And keep going throughout, and we'll be, announcing and tagging them, and giving you guys some more acknowledgement on Slack. So It's a fun challenge. All right, so wrapping things up, Maria did an incredible job highlighting different effective visuals and how you use them and what you use them for. Sorry, hopefully I don't know if you guys saw that. Making sure that you choose the right format for your presentation, that you have your points highlighted and summarized properly, but also that the story of the data is being shared. And then be thoughtful about time. You know, if you're presenting and you give an entire long presentation and management's tuned out 2 minutes into the presentation, you're not being effective. And the diplomatic point is a very good one. You have to make sure that you're speaking in a way that people want to listen to you. If you tell management, well, management, because you, and you start a sentence like that, they've tuned out already because, yeah, they get told that they're doing something wrong all day long. Somebody tells them something, and it's just easy to be like, okay, but what we're doing is working. So instead, wording things in a positive way, wording things in a thoughtful way that makes them want to say, wait, let me ask questions about that. I want to know more. Oh, and I noticed the way you did this works really well here. I saw that you could apply it here as well. Boom, now I'm interested. Wait, something I'm doing is working and you can make it work even better and more? I want to know more about that. So make sure that you are being thoughtful about what your messaging is and why. Be prepared. Don't have where you're giving this great information and then the manager asks that question and you don't know the answer. Sometimes you do have to say, I'll get back to you on that. But having that information there and then is so much more effective. And then making sure that you pace the presentation. Again, being thoughtful about time, but also being thoughtful about comprehension. While I might understand what you're saying in this context at the speed of light, maybe your other manager doesn't. Or maybe you're talking about a topic I'm not very familiar with and I need to digest what you're saying and take those pauses and ask a question or, you know, make sure I'm getting understanding. And in that same sense, if you're presenting in person or where you can see reactions, watch for those reactions and cue yourself to, oh, I need to pause, I need to slow down. I'm getting some people tuning out. Doesn't necessarily mean they're bored and speed up. Sometimes it means they can't understand you. Slow down. Be more dramatic in your speech. And then just make sure that you're keeping what you're trying to say, the story of the data at the forefront the entire time. So, do you have anything to add, Maria?
No, I think this perfectly concludes our presentation. And I saw there were a couple of questions in the chat. So the first one is, there are companies who have preset templates and you cannot be creative much. What would you suggest then if there are some limitations, let's say?
Do you want to take that one? You want me to take it?
You can take it.
Okay, feel free to jump in and add on. So usually if you have preset, you know, this is how we want you to present the data, there's a reason for it. A lot of times there's a consistency. If I'm looking at a quarterly report or looking at something where I'm seeing it, you know, each quarter, if you change the format, it changes my understanding of the data. I don't have that comparable information. One thing that you can do is, if you're allowed to have some supplemental information, is include it in the format that's given, as well as add a different one that then you can use as a, here's my explanation of that. You have to usually be pretty limited on that, but it's one way to kind of insert something. Obviously, if you can advocate for, hey, can we get a change? There's a reason this visual doesn't work as well, and I want to use this visual, and can we switch that up? Again, sometimes that transition has to happen where they're seeing their same familiar one and the new one. Some managers hate seeing the same boring old graphs over and over. Others, they depend on that in order to make their decisions because it helps them understand the data. So just be cognizant of who your audience is and why it's being done that way. Because I think that's something where sometimes I want to be more creative, but that's not going to be useful for the audience. So I have to be conscious of my decision making there. If I have no other choice, then it's can you be creative elsewhere? You know, instead of it being in the graph or chart itself or the way the data is presented, it's can you use different words that help make things different? You know, like there's lots of different ways to kind of be creative and change the way something's perceived. not just with the colors you use on a graph or the format or the type of graph that's being used. So it just depends, very situational, but those are some kind of troubleshooting ideas of how to handle that.
Yeah, thank you. So there was a question, will it not increase the risk to fall into the gray area when explanations aren't aligned with facts? Of course, so your explanations need to be aligned with the facts you have, because otherwise it's interpretation, or it might be, yeah, so your explanations have to be based on what the facts are. Because if you interpret it, then people might not believe you, of course. So all explanations have to be based on the data, let's say. I hope this answers the question.
I have an add-on quickly. I think that there's a key here of which facts, right? Sometimes you're presenting and there's a ton of data there and you're highlighting, and it's which facts you're pulling out. And that is, you can be deceptive if you choose to pull out only key facts, right? Just in the same way as you can be deceptive if you go, oh, here's the data for the year, we're going to trim and show only this part, and look, it's going up there, and I'm going to use only that part of the data for my example here. And that's where you, as a person who's presenting data, need to have that data integrity and make sure it's being presented in a truthful way. And same with your explanations. They need to be representative of the whole of the data. They need to be answering the question that's asked. If I'm asking a question that's only regarding this section, then it might be appropriate to only talk about that section. But you need to make sure that the facts that are being stated are addressing the question that's being asked. And maybe you need to help make sure the right questions getting asked by using the data.
Yeah. Okay, maybe the last question. Talking about data presentation, how true is that the management doesn't just focus on our data presentation, but also on the way we comport ourselves? For example, walk in, our courtesy, and what we wear. Is it really true? From my perspective, from what I know, it depends. Generally, yes, because let's say, for example, there are some management guys who, especially of the older generation, if you don't walk in the costume on you, in the suit, let's say, if you don't look serious, or even sometimes, unfortunately, if you look too young, they might not take you seriously. That happens, unfortunately. In the later generations, maybe we're a little bit more, let's say, where the power distance is not that big, then maybe it's a little bit not that distant and not that strongly visible. But still, especially in business, people learn all these things, like how do you behave, where do you hold your hands. If you touch your nose, then you're lying. So all these psychology tricks, they usually know, unfortunately. So it is good to know them too, and to pay attention on how you speak, where you hold your hands. If it's under the table, then you feel uncomfortable. So take the pose, let's say the power seat, where you feel comfortable. Put your hands on the table if you're sitting. If you're standing, don't put your hands into the pockets, because because it doesn't look good and everybody's getting distracted to your pockets. So this plays roles. But of course, yes, as said, it depends on the company. There's also the comment, yeah, the power distance, the age, the culture, the company's culture. It's all, there are a lot of big factors. Cultural differences. If it's east or west, it's also different. So you have to take those things into consideration. Because, as said also, the information consists 60% or to 70% of nonverbal communication. So when you don't speak, you still communicate. I hope this answers the question. And we're out of time. We're out of time. And if you have any questions, then feel free to contact Rachel and me for any further requests.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for attending. We really are happy that we got to see y'all. And yeah, post on Slack. Don't forget. Post your bad parts.
Correct. All right, then see you on Slack and have a
See you on Slack,
great
guys.
rest of the day or good night.
Thank you. Was great.